Justin Graves meets one new person every day. He uses this goal to learn from those who may be different from him, to seize opportunities to help them, and to help everyone feel a little more included. This exercise in engagement and service stems from a belief that inclusion and compassion have the power to change our lives and our world. As founder and owner of hEEz-AWn-wEElz, Justin uses his platform as a motivational speaker, community leader, mentor, and blogger to educate on the importance of social engagement, community inclusion, and disability advocacy. His unique brand of inclusion advocacy has been featured in various media forms and even recognized by First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, and the Obama presidential administration. You may be surprised to learn that while hEEz-AWn-wEElz is Justin's passion job, it's not his day job. By day, he serves as a management and program analyst for information technology and human capital at the Department of Homeland Security in Washington, D.C. He began his career at DHS in 2007 as an intern, and today is responsible for student programs as well as the recruitment, engagement, and recognition of 500 plus IT and cyber federal employees. By night, he is a dog dad to 14-year-old Beagle Hound mix named Charlotte. And without further ado, Justin, you have the floor.
Awesome. Thank you, Suhaila, for that wonderful introduction. That was fantastic. It was perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so grateful to see so many of you all with your cameras on. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And yes, like Haida said, if you feel comfortable, please do. But if not, that is totally okay as well. So yeah, thank you so much for that great introduction. I am so happy and so excited to be here with you all today. Before we get started though, I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Okay, so yeah, I'm so excited and so happy and pumped to be here with you all today. This is gonna be the name of my talk today: Ableism, Activism, and Advocacy. This is the first time that I've given this exact talk. I do quite a bit of motivational speaking, and I'm really grateful to be able to do that. Like Suhaila said, as my passion job. But for me, it's like, it'd be really easy to just give the same talk every time, but I can't stand that. Like, I think that that would be really boring and really annoying, not only for you all, but for me too. So today's talk, it's brand new and I'm really, really excited about it. I'm really grateful to kind of have our missions like unite here today. I think it'll be really interesting. And I think that you all will see that there's a lot of similarities, and you'll see a glimpse not only into who I am, but also the work that is so important to me. And since you all are here at 4 o'clock on a Sunday evening, I think it's important to you too. And after this talk, I want you to feel empowered and enabled to really take what I share with you guys and implement it into your own everyday work. And I'm not just going to be talking at you the whole time. I really plan to have a dialogue and encourage you all to talk with each other. We're going to do some breakout rooms, and I think it's going to be great. So yeah, let me before we get started though with like the content of today's talk, I really want to like level set with you and share a little bit about myself and why I'm here today. So this is just a little bit of an intro slide. I want to give you guys a little bit of background on exactly who I am. So as you know, my name's Justin. Live in Northern Virginia right now. I'm in Fairfax, Virginia. Like Haida said, I have my day job and my passion job. My passion job is called hEEz-AWn-wEElz. It's my company. It's a social movement that I started, and we'll get more into the details in that in just a little bit. You will probably be able to tell that my presentation style is fairly informal and kind of laid back, but I really want you all to know that I'm kind of legit also, like, not, so that's the reason that I kind of shout out these credentials at the beginning, not as like a flex or to gloat or anything like that, but just to let you know kind of what my background is. So in 2012, I graduated with my bachelor's from Virginia Tech. And then I enjoyed Virginia Tech and going to school there so much that I decided to stick around for 2 more years. And I ended up getting my master's degree in 2014. My bachelor's was in sociology with a focus in social inequality. And then my master's was in educational leadership and policy studies. And so that's just a little bit of a background as far as like what I did in school. And then, like I've said a couple of times, day job, passion job. That's not really important for today's conversation though. So I'm not really going to harp on that too much. But what I do really want to harp on to get started today is the journey. And what I mean by the journey is not just, what's fun and what's exciting and what's pretty and the stuff that someone might put on their intro slide for a talk like this or post on social media. I want to talk to you all about really what's brought me here today and how everything has come together. And I want to give you a high level overview, but there are also several important pieces that I think are going to inform my perspective based on the talk that I'm going to share with you all today. So, one of the things that is very important about me that you might not be able to tell through this Zoom room and on the camera right now, but I'm sitting in a wheelchair. I use a wheelchair to get around, and the reason for that is that I am paralyzed. And I have been paralyzed ever since the age of 3. Just this morning, I met someone for the first time, and they were very forward, and they asked me, like, was it congenital, which means were you born, paralyzed, or, was it an accident? What happened? And I get asked this question all the time. I would say that there is not a week in my life that goes by that someone doesn't ask me this question. And the reason that I really love answering that question is because I would rather someone ask from a place of curiosity instead of them, just kind of staring and wondering. So that's what I want to start today's talk with is the story about how I became paralyzed. This is the name of the viral spinal inflammation that ended up, resulted in my paralysis. It's called transverse myelitis. And on this slide, there's a person, an image, like a silhouette of a person with their spinal cord on the left side and the definition on the right side. Basically, transverse myelitis means this. Transverse means across, like width, and myelitis means inflammation. So transverse myelitis was a viral inflammation across the width of my spinal cord. And kind of like 2/3 down my back was the site where the transverse myelitis, where I got it. And to this day, like I said, I was 3 years old. I'm 30 years old now, and 27 years ago, and also today, they still have no idea how I got transverse myelitis. And the way that we knew I had transverse myelitis was that I woke up at my babysitter's house one day and I couldn't feel my legs. It was that sudden. I laid down for a nap, I woke up, and then out of nowhere, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't get up, I can't walk. What is going on? And I don't really remember anything from this experience. It actually is all, kind of told to me through stories, through friends, my parents. I have 2 older siblings and my babysitter at the time. And one thing that they always remind me is that when they tell me the story in hindsight, they say, like, we thought you were joking. We thought that when you laid down and you woke up and you said you couldn't feel your legs, we thought that you were not being serious, that, it was something that you were like kind of being funny and not being serious. And in hindsight, like I get it, I was 3 years old at the time. And I get that, you might think, oh, wow, that person, this kid, he's 3 years old, he's just cranky, he's like irritable, he just wants some attention. But that wasn't the case at all. It was very serious. And my babysitter said that she remembered me describing this pain that I had that was going up and down my spinal cord, like, in the middle of my back. And of course, I didn't know what that meant. Like I just said, my back hurts, my back hurts. And so I remember they always tell me that she called 911 and then she called my parents. And then my parents were like, oh my gosh, of course we'll come. And then apparently, like they left their jobs. This all happened in Woodbridge, Virginia. So I think most of us probably are from Northern Virginia. So it was in Woodbridge at Little Lambs Daycare, and my parents worked in DC, so they came to the daycare. And then one thing I do remember from that day was my dad trying to like pick me up. Like I was laying in bed, I remember picking me up and like trying to stand me like on my 2 feet, and I just fell down. And they always say like that's when they knew that it was serious. That's when they knew that like okay, Justin is not joking. And the other thing I remember from that day is being put in an ambulance and then being taken to like the nearest volunteer fire department. And from there, they like helevaced me to the hospital, which was a hospital I was born at, actually, Inova Fairfax Hospital. And that's the only 2 memories that I have from that day. Those 2 moments was my dad picking me up and me falling and being in that helicopter because I thought that was pretty cool. I still think it's pretty cool. But yeah, it was a long journey, a really, really long, not a great journey. But the reality was not that transverse myelitis ended up paralyzing me. It was actually the surgery that they did to save my life. So the transverse myelitis was in my spinal cord, and they had to operate and take those fragments of my spinal cord out so that the transverse myelitis, the infection, wouldn't spread up or down my spinal cord. And especially if it spread up my spinal cord, eventually it would go to my brain and it would probably kill me. So doing the surgery on my spinal cord and the eventual paralysis was the best solution at the time. So I was 3 years old when this all happened, and I do have these memories in these pictures that you see here from rehab, physical therapy, a lot of occupational therapy, and learning how to use my new legs, my wheelchair. And I very intentionally say, to this day, I don't say that I'm confined to a wheelchair. I don't say that, I'm stuck in a wheelchair. I say that I use a wheelchair to ambulate. And that is very intentional, purposeful language because I don't think that I'm confined to anything. I can hop out of my chair pretty easily. It's just a different way to get around, in my opinion. And that mindset is definitely thanks to the two other people that you see in these two pictures, my mom and my dad. Even though I just turned 30 in September, but to this day, even as a grown up, as an adult, I guess now, I am so grateful for my parents. And I will always let anyone that I talk to know that because my parents are the reason that I have so much resilience and a lot of the perspective that I do to this day. And that's rooted in two things that they always taught me. And this was especially that they started teaching me during rehab. First was that, Justin, you can do anything you want. Even though you're in a wheelchair, you can do anything you want. You might just have to do it a little bit differently. And at the time, that didn't make that much sense to me, but it does now. It definitely does now. But even more important than that was the second principle that they taught me, which was you have to make sure that you behave in a way that people see you as an individual before they see your wheelchair. And back then, that made even less sense. I had no idea what they meant by that. But over time, I've learned everything that they meant about that in terms of people will look at me and just judge me and be like, wow, like that guy, if he can't walk, then he probably can't open a door on his own, or he probably can't live on his own, or he probably can't, take care of a pet on his own, or he probably can't drive. He probably can't live independently. These are all assumptions that I get all the time, and they're all wrong. So I do my best to live in a way that people see me as Justin Graves before they see my wheelchair. And so, yeah, so that's the story about how my disability has really, kind of come into my life and I own it. And it's also really developed my entire mindset around service. And when I went to college in 2008, I realized that I went from like a relatively smaller, close knit community in high school to a really, really big university setting at Virginia Tech. I realized that people were oftentimes like treating me differently, and not different in like a good way, not in a way that I liked at all. And at the end of the day, I ended up um, basically trying to will my own experience at college. And the way that I decided to do that was by putting myself out there as much as possible because I knew that I knew why people were treating me differently. It was acutely obvious to me, but I knew that I had the power to do something about it. And what I ended up, I didn't do this overnight, but what I ended up doing was starting hEEz-AWn-wEElz. And the motto for hEEz-AWn-wEElz is life is all about what you have done for other people. I wanted to take something that people saw as a negative or as a weakness and totally turn it around and use it as my strength. So hEEz-AWn-wEElz, with life is all about what you've done for other people as the motto, there are three values or three areas that I kind of work in with hEEz-AWn-wEElz. And these are the three areas: disability advocacy, social inclusion, and community engagement. And those have really developed over time. And originally it was just disability, but as I've grown, my mission has also grown. And that's really important to me because it's like when I was 20, 21 years old, my focus was different than it is now. I've gotten so much more passionate about social inclusion and community. And I'm going to share with you how that kind of happened. I started with this goal of meeting one new person every single day. And this goal is obviously like it's kind of big, right? One new person every single day is kind of a lot. But as you might be able to tell, I am very extroverted. I love people. I get all of my energy from other people. But this goal is, especially in quarantine, it's a really, really big challenge. I'm not as good as I used to be, but I'm doing my best to keep up with it. And I found that it's a lot easier to, include people and get to know them if I just talk with them and engage with them and learn from them because I love learning. I think we are all creatures that love learning, but I'll be honest with you all, I do not love to read. Reading, I don't know how I got through graduate school. Reading is it's not my strong suit, but I love to learn. And I look at people as like walking, moving, breathing, talking books. Like if I can sit down and learn from someone in conversation, to me that is 10 times more amazing than having to sit down and reading it from a book. And when I meet people through this goal of meeting one new person every day, I realize that inclusion is so much easier to come by. It is almost second nature. It's something that literally just happens based on the way that I, move through the world and the way that I live my life. And I encourage you all to do not exactly the same thing, because a lot of times people will see this and they'll say, wow, I could never meet one new person every day. Like, I don't know how I could do that. I don't have that kind of, energy and extroversion. But I don't think that everyone should adopt this goal. Maybe it's one new person every month. Maybe it's one new person in each class, every semester or every quarter. Make a goal that is scalable for you. But I guarantee you, the more people that you interact with and the more people that you get to know, the easier it'll be to be more inclusive. So this goal of meeting one new person every day, I started this in 2008. And like I said, I still continue it in a different way now. But I realized over time that even though this goal was successful at like helping people learn that like, oh wow, that Justin guy, like he might use a wheelchair, but we don't have to treat him any differently. He's still very independent. He can live life on his own terms. I still realized that although that changed, there was something else that was still really eye-opening to me. And it was the fact that I was oftentimes the only one. And by the only one, I mean usually the only Black person. Well, sometimes the only Black person, but definitely the only person who used a wheelchair, and definitely the only Black person who was also using a wheelchair. So what I came to learn about myself was that I actually thrived in those settings. I actually really enjoyed being able to be, in these settings where I was able to really deliver a unique perspective. And I learned a lot about myself in those environments. And to this day, I still learn a lot about myself in those environments. And so that's really where one new person every day came from, is being able to, show people who I was as an individual. And as I worked my way through college, especially when I was getting my bachelor's degree and learning about sociology, like I mentioned, that's what I majored in. I learned about this really, really cool theory. And I promise I'm not going to get like too sciencey on you guys. I wanted to keep this presentation kind of light for today, but I just really quick want to touch base on this. It's called the intergroup contact theory, or the easier way to remember it, a lot of people call it the contact hypothesis. And this is basically just a practice in compassion and empathy. And it really helps you build community in different places, no matter where you go. And I serve in a lot of different roles, a lot of different communities. And I have found that the contact hypothesis is the easiest way to be effective in those different roles that I serve. So, what is it? You might be asking yourself, okay, so what exactly is the contact hypothesis? Here's how it works. It basically says that if you, well, actually, let me use myself as an example. If I were to have a positive interaction with someone who identifies as white or Caucasian, and a trans person, and is from Egypt. Let's use those three social identities. So they're Caucasian, they're trans, and their background, they're born and raised in Egypt. If I have a positive interaction with the person that fits those three social identities, then next week, if I meet someone who is also white, trans, and from Egypt, or has either just one of those qualities, then I am more likely to have a positive experience with that next person who shares those same social identities. So it's basically saying, if you have contact with someone in all of those ways that they are different from you, then you are that much more likely to have a positive experience with someone who is similarly situated or has a similar social identity in the future. So it's pretty simple. It's basically just saying, the more interactions and the more different experiences that you have, the more likely you are to be inclusive with other people in the future. And why would we not want to be more inclusive with other people in the future, right? So one example of this, one way this always comes up in my life is at work. In my day job, I work with a lot of different kinds of people, a lot of different emotions and attitudes and perspectives. And it has been this contact hypothesis and, understanding it has been life-changing because it really helps me understand where someone else is coming from. And, I can say to myself, like, oh, wow, like, okay, if a person is reacting to me this way or behaving towards me this way, I can, kind of take a move back and say, okay, like maybe this is why based on past experiences. And I have this whole toolkit that has been developed from meeting one new person every day. And it's really helpful with conflict resolution as well. When you are in a situation where it might be hard to have a tough conversation, or you might be butting heads with someone. If you think about the contact hypothesis and try to kind of triangulate where that person is coming from based on past experiences, it's really a big help in terms of resolving conflict and helping encourage peace. So this next slide is probably my favorite slide in the entire slideshow. And Haida, I know you're going to like this one. It's one of my favorite quotes. Like she said, diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. And this quote is by Verna Myers. She's a renowned diversity advocate, and she also recently was appointed the vice president of inclusion at Netflix. And when you do this, I live my life by this quote, because when you do this, it makes people feel included, it makes people feel heard, and I guarantee you it leads to so much less conflict. So next time you're in a tough situation, maybe you're in a room where you see someone not being included, think about it this way. Diversity is, yeah, you're at the party, you're in the room where it happens, and that's nice. But true inclusion is asking that person to dance. Very, very important. So to kind of round out my part of the talk today, before we transition to, the dialogue and, really getting to know each other a little bit more, one new person every day, every single day. And I'll say in quarantine, honestly, like I would say probably like 3 days out of each week, 3 or 4. I'm by no means perfect, but it's all about that mindset. It's about that mindset of, even if I leave the house and I don't meet one new person that day, of still keeping my eyes open and being aware that there is so much opportunity in the people that I might be able to meet. And even if you can't meet one new person every single day, it's important to be of service to people and to be an ally and to be objective and advocate for perspectives that even you might not share yourself. And you'll become that much more sensitive to other people's perspectives if you're engaging with them, if you're connecting with them, if you're meeting them. One last quote that I want to share with you all. As you can probably tell that I'm really big on quotes. It's kind of just like reminders every day of how I could and should be leading in my everyday life. The next quote is actually from First Lady Michelle Obama. She's one of my personal people that I look up to. And she said, "Life is all about what you've done for other people." Justin Graves said that, basically. She quoted me in one of her speeches. It was one of the coolest moments of my life. It was when I graduated from college in 2012, and she was our commencement speaker. And she highlighted this quote that I had shared with a magazine at Virginia Tech as a way that people should really think about living their lives. And that's how it became the motto for hEEz-AWn-wEElz. Life is all about what you've done for other people. And this really sums up all of my work in a nutshell. It is one new person every day, it's community service, it's social inclusion, it's community engagement. And these couple of questions that I'm about to share with you now, as we start the dialogue portion of today's talk, I think you'll really understand even more what I'm coming from, because I don't want to just tell you. I want to actually show you and get you all thinking about how this could apply in your everyday life as well. So this is kind of what dialogue looks like for a lot of us right now. And even before COVID, like I feel like a lot of times dialogue is through a screen, it's on our phones, like it's something that we're doing that is not face to face. And obviously because COVID, it's still going to be virtual, but I'm going to try my best to make this a little more interactive and engaging for all of us. So I encourage you to take your phone, put it down, face down, turn it on vibrate, do not disturb, whatever you want, because I want you to try and engage as fully as possible with the breakout rooms that we're about to get divided into. I have 4 different questions that you'll see on the next slide in just a moment. But the reason I want to do breakout rooms is, and honestly, I'll be honest with you, like I'm taking classes right now in graduate school, and I can't stand breakout rooms. I usually do not use them. I really don't like them. But I thought for the purpose of today's conversation, I was like, okay, maybe this will be a good opportunity. So if you hate it, truly, please let me know at the end, and I'll know to never do this again. But it's going to be a little experiment. And before I show you the questions, I want to kind of give you a couple of qualifiers. One, if your true, honest answer to this question in your breakout room is embarrassing or it makes you uncomfortable, that's okay. This is a safe space. I give you complete carte blanche, authority, permission, validation, everything. To even if it's a little embarrassing, please, please, please still share it. I know that's exactly what I would do. And I'll be honest, up until 4 o'clock when I was editing my slides at the last minute, I even had to go in and change the language in some of the questions because there was literally ableism in the question that I wrote. So I'm not trying to be like, oh, I'm perfect, I've got it all figured out, because I don't. So please, like, be vulnerable. And I'm really just all about normalizing, sharing those kinds of things, especially in the safe space that we're in here today. So we're going to have 4 questions here. Those 4 questions are, I'll read them all together, but and then you'll get your room assignment in just a moment. First question: have you ever felt guilty for a privilege that you may have? Second question: in what ways do you advocate for yourself? And then also, in what ways do you advocate for others? Question number 3 for room number 3: have you ever been ableist, either on accident or on purpose? Okay. And then last question for group number 4: have you experienced ableism happening around you? And if so, what did you do? So at this point, oh, perfect. Haida, thank you so much for dropping those in the chat for me. So at this point, we're gonna break out into these rooms. I encourage you to discuss, vulnerably and honestly and directly with those folks who are in the room with you. Remember that there is no right or wrong answer. And if we have time, I would love for you to please nominate one person from your room to maybe report out on, maybe just do like a high level summary of what you shared in the room. And that's optional. If the conversation is so great and you don't have time to assign someone, like, don't even worry about it. That's okay. But yeah, so Haida, take it away. If you could assign us into rooms, that'd be great. Thank you.
I believe we're all back. Yeah, so now we want to open it up. Maybe Justin, if you want to lead this conversation, like hearing what everyone had to say in from the breakout rooms.
Yes, absolutely. So our room, I was in room number 2, was fantastic. Really, really good conversation. But how about we report out in reverse order, if that's okay? So maybe we take like 90 seconds per room and like do 4, 3, 2, and then 1. So if maybe the representative, did you all have one for room number 4?
So we talked about sort of like ableism happening around us has sort of happened at different levels. For I guess for our group, like me specifically, there was a lot of times like in elementary school and then in middle school and then now in high school. And it's like, and then there's, people that you see versus like people that are genuinely like your friends at a time. And then there's also like, we also talked about just seeing ableism like in media or like with creators that you follow and then trying to like cope from that. And basically what we said that we had done is like if it was a person that we knew was capable of change, we would speak to them and explain how like, hey, you shouldn't say like the R word, or hey, you shouldn't treat someone differently because like they have a verbal or a nonverbal disability, or hey, it's not okay for you to like parade around another student with like autism and make it sound like something that's not. And when it was somebody that was able to change, most of the time the situation would resolve, and we were young, so it was like we were able to like, hey, take a step back and be like, okay, that was a wrong thing to do, and apologies were made. But then there also comes a point where there's people that are incapable of change, and it became a point where you could do so many things and explain so many situations and they still wouldn't like recognize that they were in the wrong, and then it just becomes more harmful. Or if it's like I said with the media, if it's like a celebrity, like we were talking about recently, like with Sia and the movie that she came out with, and all the controversy about like casting an actor that doesn't have autism and everything with that, and how it's like it kind of puts you in a situation where you don't exactly know what to do because you want to be a good ally, but you can't change anything in that situation because the ableism is still occurring around you, but you can't do anything about it. So yeah, that's what we talked about.
Awesome. Those are all really good examples. That sounds great. Thank you for sharing that. How about room number 3? Did you all
That
have
was, we were talking about like how if we've ever been ableist in our lives, and the common thing we were saying, it's so intertwined into like our culture and the way we talk, in words we just spewed out that we might not even know the meaning. And you were also saying how at a very young age, a lot of us didn't notice, and then as we grew up and we learned more and our friend groups expanded and we had a more diverse community with near us, is when we started to learn things. So, you know, the R word's a pretty big one, how we hear that a lot still, unfortunately. Even words like lame, you know. Unfortunately, I've used that word a lot before just to describe like a movie. Oh, that was really lame, and that can be ableist. And so just little things that you might not even notice, but have so much meaning, and can cause so much harm. And I think that was pretty much what we were saying.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much, Miriam. And just real quick, the example of saying lame, literally a friend called me out on that, was on Friday. No, Thursday, it was Thursday. I was on the phone and I don't even remember what I said, but I literally used the word lame and she was like, like maybe, you know, have you ever thought about like what that word really means? And I stopped. I was like, no, like, what do you mean? And she explained it to me and I was like, wow, like I had never even thought about that. And I'm like the person that talks about like ableist language, you know? So that was a great example. Thank you for sharing that. I totally resonate. Cool. So yeah, like I mentioned, I was in room number 2 and our question was in what ways do you advocate for yourself and what ways do you advocate for others? And I won't really share too much of my perspective because you guys have heard of that, but the folks in my room I thought was some of the coolest thing that I heard was the first one was just talking about like, and I think the biggest one was knowing when to like not cross the line of advocating on the behalf of others. And one of the examples that was used was like the Black Lives Matter movement is, you know, if you are not Black and you're maybe not directly affected by a lot of the issues that the Black Lives Matter movement is trying to address, then, you know, how do you be a good advocate and an ally, but make sure that you don't, you know, figuratively step on any toes or kind of go too far, and knowing, you know, kind of, you know, just kind of knowing that place, but also still being really, you know, self-aware and compassionate and inclusive, right? So like that was a big thing that we talked about. Also, the idea of making sure that you advocate for yourself from a place of experience, so that you know you can really speak truly and intimately and authentically to the experiences that you're advocating for. That can be really useful in kind of, you know, maybe assessing like, okay, I could advocate for that, but I might not really experience that, but I have experienced this. So let me really, you know, kind of make sure that I'm advocating for that. And then also, the last thing I'll share is kind of just knowing how to like honor and address your privilege. You know, and when you're advocating for others who might not have as strong or frankly as privileged of a voice, that can be really useful when thinking about how to advocate for both yourself and others. Yeah, I thought our conversation was great. Thank you guys. And then group number 1.
So for my group, we didn't really have a representative, and we actually answered our question, but the discussion went on for all the questions. So sorry about that. We literally talked to the last second. But Samir, Sehi, Charlotte, Sada, if any of you guys want to go ahead, you can do so.
I can go ahead. So we began with the first question of like privilege. The biggest thing I would say we talked about is things that we normally take for granted. A topic we covered was food. You know, for us, food is readily available, but for a lot of people it isn't. So people being wasteful and just throwing away your leftovers is something that we tend to feel guilty about. And also other things like education is something we really take for granted. Like all of us go to school, but a lot of people in the world don't. And we tend to complain about, oh, I have this assignment due, I hate going to school, but it's something that so many people would give away so much to be able to do. And other things we mentioned are ableist actions. A lot of us used to use some ableist terminology. I know I personally used to say lame a lot, and then Christina, she's actually here, but she called me out on it and then removed that from my vocabulary. But we also talked about an ableist mindset, things when it comes to assumptions that we might make about the disabled community. That isn't really something that, unless you voice it out loud, is something that you can identify unless it's within yourself. And I think that's probably the hardest thing to change, which is your mindset, but that also makes it the most important. And then advocating for yourself and others, that also involved a lot of mindset things. For yourself, it can involve coming out of your shell, becoming more confident, removing some terminology that makes you sound more passive, and being able to voice your disagreements, things like that. But advocating for other people, it can be when they're uncomfortable or not fully used to talking to people who say are in authority figures, and helping them. So either encouraging them, or if they're really not comfortable doing so, either voicing it for them. But also, I think a lot of us have our own like fields, things that we have interests in, and a lot of us minorities in those fields. So for example, me, I like politics, but women aren't really in politics that much. It's growing, but it's still important that I advocate for other women as well. And Samir, for example, he talked about how he's a climate activist, and he got into that because where he's from, Bangladesh, suffers a lot of the detriments that come from climate change. So making sure that you're also advocating for other minorities or other people who are disproportionately affected by things that you're interested in.
Awesome. You guys touched a lot of really good points. That was great. Thank you for sharing that. Great. Okay, so let's see. Actually, a couple of like closing points that I wanted to make real quick. Let me get my screen share going once more. This part of the presentation, it took me like probably an hour. Like the rest of the presentation was it just kind of came to me extemporaneously. I was like, oh, this is going to be great. This is going to be great. But the end, I was like, how am I going to put a nice little bow on this before we get to the questions and answers? And one thing that really kept coming to mind for me was that it's very apparent probably to you all that my story is very deeply rooted and focused in ableism. And I just wanted to kind of, hammer home the idea that your story, very equally important, if not more important, because you guys are like literally the future. Your story might not be the same as mine, and that is 1,000% okay. My story is rooted in ableism because I live my life with a very obvious and life-changing physical disability. And for me, I really want to focus not just on the ableism part, but really on the activism and the advocacy part, especially advocacy for yourself. There are two sayings that one of my old bosses used to always say. He would always say, there's no interest like self-interest, which I always thought was kind of funny. As in, there's no one that's going to look out for you like yourself. And then one thing I always like to say is that if you don't think you're the best thing since sliced bread, then no one else will. And when it comes to advocacy, those two sayings, I think the way that they relate to being an advocate for yourself and for other people is that you have to be confident, and not, treading over into the lane of being cocky, but you absolutely have to be confident and, just so emphatic about the value that you add, because you add so much value, not just to your communities, not just, to your family, but to the world. Each of us, I truly believe, like adds actual value just by existing in this world and by meeting people and connecting with people. And so it's so important for you to realize that, like, if you look out for yourself, if you advocate for yourself, like, it's only positives. And once you start advocating for yourself, it almost becomes second nature. You really do kind of start, extending that to advocating for other people. And I also had a note here that we really kind of hammered home in our breakout room in room number 2, was when you're advocating, speak from that place of experience, because no one can take that away from you. It's so, so important. There's a saying that, like, we can be the one to develop peace through inclusion. And that really, like, it just hit home in my mind when thinking about, lead peace and all of the amazing work that you all are doing. But I encourage you to think not just we can be, but we will be the ones to develop peace through inclusion. I think that that is so, so, so important. So just kind of in closing, this part, I want to make sure we have time for questions. So I'm going to kind of like blitz through this. But one, with the general election. Like, obviously, that's been on top of all of our minds. Two, COVID-19, pandemic. Like, I think it really makes us think that life is hard, and it makes us think about how do we connect with others. But at the end of the day, I think hEEz, just the way that you guys have developed as an organization, I think it is absolutely incredible what you all are doing. And I think that when it comes to the divisiveness of the election, of the craziness of the pandemic and quarantine and Zoom school and all of this crap, like, I understand that it can be really, really stressful and really frustrating, but I really want you all to continue to feel empowered. Like, I really just want to make sure I'm doing my part as, a speaker today, to continue to encourage you to do what you're doing. Because I remember, like, in my former years when I did a similar, developing hEEz-AWn-wEElz and, trying to develop a social movement of convincing people that inclusion was as important as I know that it is. But when I was doing it, I was like 20, 21 years old. I was older than you guys are right now. So it's so, so important to me to really just remind you all to just keep doing what you're doing. Keep coming to events like this. And also, just like a quick shout out to the design team for hEEz. Like, as I was going through your all social media, I was like, you all are killing it. Like, I need to like hire them to do some like graphic design for me. Like, it's amazing. But back to the point, I'm so overall in awe of the work that you all are doing and the message that you're spreading. Building community is the most important thing to me. And it is so inspiring to see you all, especially at the stage in your life that you are, doing the work that you're doing. It's absolutely incredible. And I just really wanted to kind of give gratitude and thanks and compliments on the fact that at 5 o'clock on a Sunday evening, when you could be doing anything else, you're here listening to me. And I just think that that says a lot about your character and about the potential that you all have and the incredible legacy that you all are going to have or going to leave. So with that, like Haida just mentioned in the chat, if you all have any questions, feel free to drop them right there in the chat. I'm actually going to take off my screen share now, just because I really want to be able to see your all's faces if you do have questions. But yeah, like I said earlier, totally safe space. Like, it is, I'm the hardest person to offend. So even if you have like some kind of deep cut question that you're like, ooh, that might be weird, go for it. Like, I promise it'll be okay. But yeah, I would love to take some time to address any questions you might have.
I just had a question about your goal of meeting one new person a day. How have you been going about that with the pandemic and everything being virtual?
Yeah, Sehi, that's a wonderful question because it took a long time for me to figure out the answer to that. And for me, I think the number one way, the number one catalyst is my dog. Like they mentioned in the introduction, I have a 14-year-old beagle hound. Her name is Charlotte. She's actually, let me see if I can do this without unplugging everything. There she is, being like, Dad, who the heck are you talking to? Why are you talking to yourself for the past hour? But yeah, so she's great. And literally when I take her out on walks, like, people love dogs. Like, so it's just like, oh my gosh, she's so cute. How old is she? And then, I usually use that as an excuse to force them to talk to me. And like, even pre-pandemic, I would talk to people literally like on the metro. Like, I don't own a car. I sold my car a long time ago. So I love just, being on public transportation, engaging with people. I'm like that guy who's like in an Uber and just like being super, super chatty. I've been in like 2 Ubers in the pandemic. Don't worry, I'm not crazy. But yeah, and so in the pandemic, Charlotte, my neighbors a lot. And then also I usually wouldn't like qualify virtual things. Like virtual, hangouts like this as like my meeting one new person every day. But obviously, like, you kind of had to give yourself some grace and some wiggle room with the pandemic. So I've started like allowing that as well. So yeah, but Charlotte is definitely like the main catalyst.
Yeah, I had a question. So I know that a lot of people are interested and want to advocate for something that is a really big taboo in a lot of cultures. So for example, like ableism, or like being able-bodied, like just talking about that in a lot of cultures is so disrespectful. So do you have any tips for people that are interested in taboo subjects, and how do they like come about and talk about these things?
Wow, that is a deep cut question. I really like that. So I'll be honest with you, off the top of my head, like, that, man, that is a hard question. The first thing that I'm thinking of is just to truly be as well versed on that taboo topic as you possibly can. Do everything that you can to learn about it, research it, especially even if it's taboo, but it's something that you have a lived experience with. like just go back and think about like, okay, like as I started developing this, this perspective or this identity, what kind of feelings did I go through? How, what kind of challenges did I have? And then also, when you're advocating to other people, a lot of the times it's important to let them kind of offer their opinion first, because then they're not automatically trying to combat what you're saying. Like even if they might disagree with you, it's you can say like, okay, like what do you like, in a very non-leading way, say, what do you think about blank? And realize that I didn't say, don't you think blank about this, because that's a leading question, right? But a non-leading question is, what do you think about blank? Just like straight face, no lead, not leading them in a particular direction. And I'll tell you, like my friends, they joke me all the time. They hate that because like I ask questions like that all the time because I want to get their actual opinion without thinking that I want them to agree with me, because I don't necessarily need them to agree with me. I just want to know. And then from there we can, meet in the middle. And then lastly on that, and I'm honestly just kind of thinking of this as I go, I think it's important to make sure that when you're engaging with folks, to not have a conversation with them with the intention of changing their mind. Identify what their opinion is, and then see if this is the Venn diagram, see if you can even get like this much. It doesn't need to be this, and it doesn't need to be this. Like just see if you can get like a little bit of agreement, open their mind just a little bit to what it is that you're advocating for, and then that's day one. And then maybe on day 30, they come back to you and say like, hey, Suhaila, I've been thinking about this that you said, last month. Like, let's talk about that more. So yeah, just kind of, to use kind of an ableist term, baby steps is a good way. But yeah, that's a great question. I'm actually going to write that down to think about that even more, because yeah, that's a great thought. Thank you for asking that.
I had a quick question. So, it's kind of relevant to the last one. But let's just say like you meet a new person every single day for a week, and then let's just say on that Tuesday someone says a very negative comment. And I feel like sometimes when people say like 10 nice things, that one negative thing is the thing that stands out. So how do you push through those negative comments when you face them?
It completely depends on the person who gave the comment. So that's number one for me. If it's someone who I don't know, or someone that, like, frankly, and this is going to sound kind of harsh, but I'm an honest guy. If it's someone whose opinion that I don't care about, I just let it go. I really do. I am adept at just letting things roll off my shoulders, because people say the craziest things to you, like just when you're like out rolling around in a wheelchair. Like the most annoying thing that I get is like, you better slow down, you're gonna get a speeding ticket. And it's like, they're clearly joking, but like I think that is the most ableist, annoying, rude thing to say. To, like, you wouldn't say that if I was running. Like, leave me alone. Why are you talking to me? I don't know you, So it's like those kinds of things. I'm just like, anyways, next. But more importantly, and more seriously, if it is someone who, like, if it's a friend or my parents, or a loved one, honestly, what makes me feel better is like I'll sit with it for a moment and kind of try to assess where they were coming from with that comment. What were they trying to get across by saying what they said? And if I realize that like it's still nagging and it's still in my mind, then I will have that conversation with that person and just say, hey Jaya, like that actually, like I don't know that you meant anything negative by it, but it made me feel bad, or it upset me. Like, let's have this conversation. And 9 times out of 10, when you go to a person that way, like they didn't mean anything negative by it, and so you can have that conversation, get it out in the open instead of just kind of being in your own head about it. But yeah, again, I only do that with like people that I like really mean a lot to me and that I really love. And I'll just real quick, I'll share an example. I had one of my best friends in the entire world. Just we had a bit of a falling out over something ableist that had happened in a group of friends, of both of our friends, and it was really upsetting to me. And I remember it happened later at night, and I texted her the next morning, like just like I typed it in my notes and then I copy and pasted it. Like that's how it's like aggressive. Like I like got my feelings out and I sent it to her, and I was like, I don't want to talk right now. Like this is how I feel. This is not the end of our friendship, because I know your heart and I know you didn't mean anything by it, but like I am not happy. I am upset. And that was at the beginning of the pandemic. That was like in April. Well, like we're like this now. Like I took literally like a month and a half, maybe 2 months, kind of let it process. And then I realized I was like, again, I knew her heart. It was a mistake. And we had a knockdown, drag out conversation. A lot of tears were shed, but now we're like even better than we were before. So yeah, that's one of my main, honestly, that's one of my main strategies is like sleep on it. Don't say anything rude or nasty or emotional in the moment. And then just go back. And again, if it's someone that you truly like means a lot to you and you love and you care about, it's really important to, you know, process those accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
And one last thing before we wrap up. So Justin, thank you so much. I feel like thank you is like an underestimate. Like we can't appreciate how much, like in the beginning, I was like really nervous and like I know because like my hands get really sweaty. And now they are very dry and I feel so invigorated and like energized. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I mean it, I'm really easy to find. So if you guys need anything, reach out to me.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you.